Good evening and welcome to Straight Talk. This is Eugene Chan, and the guest tonight is Dr. Anthony Neoh, and who is a barrister by profession, and he was chairman of the Securities and Futures Commission, a member of the Hong Kong SAR Basic Law Committee, and a leading expert on monetary policy and economics. Most recently, he has just completed 4 years of service as the chairman of the Independent Police Complaints Council, the IPCC, which ended yesterday. So tonight, we have the privilege of being his first audience. At this point, I should declare that I have been a member of the IPCC myself, and currently I'm still involved through the Observer Scheme. So, Tony, what an eventful 2 years it has been for the people of Hong Kong, as well as for you and the council.
Well, it's been a very eventful 3 years. In fact, I've completed 3 years rather than 4. And the reason was that I can't do 4 because of my health.
Right.
I would have done 4 if my health were allowed it.
Right.
Indeed, it has been very eventful.
Mm-hmm.
And I can tell you, a story about this. And somebody asked me right after I was appointed, he said, Tony, do you think you're overqualified for this job?
Yeah, I read that news.
You read that?
Yes, I read that.
You read that. And then I then, of course, have to say, of course, nobody is ever qualified for a public service job. Mm-hmm. You have to deal with it as it comes, with a sense of humility. I'm very glad I said that.
you certainly did. Anyway, you and I are very familiar with the role of IPCC, and maybe you can tell audience what actually is IPCC and what does we do and how it works.
Well, the IPCC is actually a system whereby the police investigations are monitored, and the integrity of that system is then ensured. Now, we call this the two-tier system.
Right.
The police investigates complaints, and we ensure that the investigation is done right, and is done completely and is done fairly. And so that, in fact, a fair and just result comes out of it. Mm-hmm. That's the function of the IPCC.
Right. It has been reported that more than 8,000 protest-related complaints has been made against the police, of which I understand only 242 cases have been handed over from the complaint against police officer Keppel, and IPCC has conducted like 55 full investigations. Do you think IPCC, are we doing our job? And do you think Hong Kong people can trust IPCC can be the police watchdog?
Well, the statistics have to be looked at this way, because the two types of complaints.
Right.
The first type comes when people are directly affected, and these are called reportable complaints. And there's actually about 1,500 of those.
Right.
There's not 8,000, actually.
Right.
There are a lot of other complaints from third parties who have seen certain things and then they've made a complaint. And those are called notifiable complaints. They're notified to us, but then they are investigated by the police, but we have no function, in fact, in ensuring them, mainly because it's impossible for the police to actually trace the person. Sometimes it comes through an anonymous complaint and so on. Hence, the numbers are large. But the actual numbers of complaints by people affected is actually about 1,200. And we're going through those with the police. And we should, in fact, be able to complete those, I'm told by the Secretary General, by the end of this year. So we've not been slow, and nor has the police. Now, there are a number of these complaints, about 100 odd at this stage, which are going through the courts.
Right.
Because they're going through the courts, then these complaints, and these are the most important ones, those deal generally with use of force. And they're going through the courts. So one will have to wait until all the trials have been completed to see what findings have been made by the court, so that then the police can complete those investigations. Now, one of the things that we have done for all of these complaints arising from the what we call the Fugitive Offenders Ordinance type of complaints have been dealt with in this way. Every single one which is reported to us is dealt with as a serious complaint, every single one. And every single one then has, when it's being investigated by the police, is always observed by an observer. Now, we have 120 observers.
Which I'm one of them. I should clear that.
You
yes.
continue to
Yes.
and thank you, because, the observers' attendance on all of these cases have been 100%
Yes.
to date. So you must have spent some time doing that, and thank you.
Certainly have.
And indeed, I have done one or two myself, and each one, in fact, takes a few hours.
Yes.
In fact, you actually have to go out to the scene. The complainant and the officer is then interviewed, and each of these interviews are attended by an observer to ensure that the interview is done completely, correctly, and fairly. So, this takes time, and we're doing this as quickly as possible.
So just now, I asked you whether you think Hong Kong people can trust IPCC can be the watchdog, and I gather the answer is kind of a yes. But how do we maintain to have the trust of the Hong Kong people? Because we have a lot of news in the media, there are a lot of talks in the social internet. How should we do, or what should we do to maintain the trust?
Well, trust, of course, is a question which I think any modern society will have to deal with. I think every modern society lacks trust nowadays.
Yes.
Except in China, if I may say so in a moment,
Yes.
where in fact over 90% of the people trust the government. But everywhere else, that figure is the other way around, it seems. And the reason, therefore, for us to do our job correctly, we have to ensure that we stick completely to the law. And the law requires us, in fact, to look at every police investigation through a complaint thoroughly. Now, at one stage during the disturbances starting from June 2019, and we found that this case-to-case approach wasn't enough, in fact, to enable us to fully understand the events. And it wasn't enough for us to perhaps demonstrate to the public that we're doing our job correctly. And which is why we decided to do the thematic study. You know that we've published a report, and the report is in front of us.
Yeah, I saw that.
It's 1,000 pages in 4 volumes. It took a lot of time. Every single fact that we put into this report is cross-referenced to a verifiable piece of evidence. And that is exactly how one develops trust, is to ensure that whatever we do is based upon verifiable evidence and based upon fact.
Yeah, Tony, I'm sure many audience would have asked me this question. I'm sure they'll be thinking, why am I not asking you this question yet? What I want to say is, in Hong Kong, the police force is actually the main instrument that's used to maintain law and order, is keep off the violence. While supporting the police as like a guardian angel, it's equally important that the police do not and cannot abuse the power that's been vested onto them. Especially with the use of force, we have the highest expectation. Do you agree? And how can we ensure that after you've been there for the chairman?
Of course I agree. And the police agrees, if I may say so, as well, because I have dealt with them for a long time. Even before I became IPCC chairman. And I had occasion to deal with them when I was in the ICAC, for example, a long time ago.
Right.
And the police, of course, is the body which enforces the law. And a group which enforces the law must abide by the law. And the law requires, in any law enforcement action, for the law enforcer, whether the police, customs, whatever, in fact, enforce the law, to use proportionate force.
Yes.
What is proportionate force depends on what force is applied by the people that they need to enforce the law against in the circumstances. You have to look at last year, from 2019. I mean, a lot of force was actually used in the public order events that we see that, all kinds of weapons, bricks were thrown, Molotov cocktails, I think a lot of projectiles were used. In fact, some of these projectiles could be quite lethal. Right. In fact, so the police, in order to deal with that, has to use proportionate force. Now, we look through this report, you'll see, in fact, that we looked at the incidents from June 2019 right up to the end of March 2020. And we've listed, in fact, all the events.
That'll be including the 21st of July incident,
June 12, June 21, July 21, August 1, August 31,
yes.
and then October 1st, and so on.
So all those incidents are of great interest of the people.
Indeed. If you look at the report, and I recommend chapter 4, for example,
Right.
which actually gives you a big chart, actually, which shows you all the incidents. The weapons which were used by the police in those circumstances, in each incident, you'll find that these are non-lethal weapons. That's number one. And number two, in fact, throughout from June to March 2020, nearly 700 police officers were injured.
Right.
Some of them seriously. Now, yes, there were some members of the public who were also injured in the course of law enforcement. But then, first of all, there's nobody any longer in hospital. That's number one. No fatalities. And therefore, really, in an aggregate sense, you can say that there's not been disproportionate force use. When I say in an aggregate sense, in other words, the police have actually systematically, in fact, applied the law and applied their regulations. I do not discount individual cases, for example, and we're still looking at those at the moment. But then each of these cases would have been looked at very carefully, because again, one would have to ensure the circumstances are fully taken into account.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Maybe we should have a break now, and don't go away. Welcome back. We've been talking tonight with Dr. Anthony Neoh about what can the IPCC do to maintain the trust of the people of Hong Kong. So, Tony, in the first part, we have just started on the thematic report, which is quite a significant part of your chairmanship. Maybe you can tell the audience, in very brief sense, why did we have a thematic report and what was the purpose of it?
But the purpose of that report is to actually help the ICAC do its job properly.
Right, IPCC.
Yeah, because we're seeing these complaints coming through, and they're coming through, in fact, through incidents, which one following the other, and these incidents are very widespread. If we were to follow the old system, just looking at complaint to complaint to complaint, we won't be able to actually fully understand the situation. Right. Which is why, in fact, we decided to cover these incidents in a macro sense. In other words, to look at them as incidents, and also to see what the police did, what they were faced with, and then to ensure that whatever we collect as facts, in fact, are verifiable. Right. Now, in fact, this study, although we've completed it, we made 52 recommendations to the commissioner in that, but the incidents and the facts that we collected are still being used today. Right. When we look at individual complaints. When we look at a complaint and say, okay, that complaint happened somewhere in Mong Kok. Right. And we look at the incident in Mong Kok to see what exactly happened from the morning till night. So that we know exactly what has happened in a macro sense. So when we look at that individual complaint, we can see it in context. That's the whole point. And that's the reason why we did it. Right. When you mention like 52 recommendations, does it mean that there are so many problems, like the minimum 52 problems that you have identified, or it just happened to be 52? Any reason for that number? It just happened to be 52, and they go over quite a number of things. Right. I think, for example, we looked at the international practice on the use of force. Right. Although we think that the police use of force was actually quite consistent with international practice and certainly consistent with the law, we think that could be improved. Right. So a lot of our recommendations really go from lessons learned. The other thing which came out of the report was that really, maybe we thought that some of these incidents could be avoided if the important targets, in fact, were better protected. Right. And we say, well, let's look at all these important, do a risk study of all the potential targets and protect them. So see, now it's like 1 year now, down the track. How many of these have been implemented, and have we been following it regularly? Well, the chief executive, when we gave her the report, she set up, she's asked the secretary to set up a working group. And the secretary, in fact, has set up a working group. in fact, 6 working groups. And of the 52, about 22 to 24 have been implemented. What the IPCC will do, of course, is to assess each of these recommendations to see the extent that they have been implemented, and perhaps make recommendations as to how, if indeed they're good, then fine. In fact, there's more to be done, then the IPCC will make recommendations.
Yes, so Tony, there's also a theory that one of the strategy, if you're going to use against the Hong Kong SAR government, is to undermine the public confidence in the police. And this has been done indirectly by attacking the IPCC. So basically putting doubt on the integrity or independence of the processes. Do you think IPCC been targeted politically as well over that sort of public order event, or what we call a black violence?
Well, you know, one has to be realistic. And in any public office, one is never far from the crossfire of different opinions.
Right.
We're in the middle of this crossfire, for sure.
For sure.
And therefore, in order to deal with this, we have to stand on the law. We have to stand on evidence. We have to stand on facts. Otherwise, where do we go?
True.
And that's exactly what we've done.
Right. Tony, and also there's another term that we always hear in the news, that they always want a commission of inquiry.
Right.
We always hear that all the time, the big pressure on the government, but eventually a thematic study was carried out. What actually happened?
As far as the commission of inquiry is concerned, I mean, I've always taken the view that's really a matter up to the government, because it's not within the remit of the IPCC to even recommend or to do one. So we do one in order to help our work. We don't do it in committee of inquiry. We did a thematic study, which are in fact observations of fact that we make, so that our work is fully informed. Now, the government decided not to do a commission of inquiry, for perhaps many reasons. And Mr. Justice Lytton, in the very, very early stages, sometime in October 2019, and he wrote an article and he said that, you know, when you start from a commission inquiry, you need to have terms of reference.
Right.
What in fact would be the proper terms of reference? If it's too wide, you can't do it. If it's too narrow, what's the point?
Right.
And therefore, really, if one has to do something, one might have to wait until, in fact, the whole storm blows over, so that people could look at these things with a calm mind. And I don't know whether the government will still do one. I have no idea at all. Right. But if the government were to do one, I think what the government would be well advised, in fact, to look at the terms of reference very carefully, because a commission of inquiry is fully dependent upon its terms of reference.
Right.
And what are we looking for? If you're looking for the police activities, there is already a report by the IPCC. I think also coming out of the courts now in terms of the cases, then the story is coming out. So you're already getting the story out through court cases, through this report, and so on. So is there much point in doing that? That's number one. Number two, if you want to go beyond that and see what motivated, in fact, the disturbances in 2019, so a much deeper question, then are you able to do that, in fact, through a commission of inquiry? One has to ask that question.
True.
Those will be very wide social, political questions. So that would not be easy. So that's the reason why I think the government is grappling with that idea and hasn't done it so far. But that's not a question for me, Eugene. I mean, that's a question for the chief executive.
No, the reason why I bring it up is because I think the thematic report came at a very good timing, whereby all the incidents can be looked at independently, and from a third party, be able to give a fair account of what has happened.
I can assure you that we didn't do that, in fact, to help the government avoid a commission of inquiry.
Oh, I'm sure you didn't. Anyway, since you just mentioned about that earlier, there has been alleged to be a lot of foreign interference, like support of the rioters from the foreign institutions. And with those accusations being arisen, do you see there are any merits in them? Especially you've been through thousands of hours of pages of reports. Do you see any merit in those accusations? Well,
the report, in fact, does chronicle a high degree of organization behind each of these events by the people who are agitating at that point in time. Tremendous organization, in fact, and we chronicle that organization. As to what is behind that organization, it is not our remit to deal with that. I mean, the central government did in fact say at some stage that they say that there was foreign influence. And of course, people waving flags and so on, that is an indication perhaps. And then people also going overseas, in fact, to talk to people, members of Congress and political figures overseas and so on. Now, but it's not within our remit, in fact, to find out, in fact, what is behind that organization. But what we have chronicled is very high degree of organization. And it's in this report.
Right. And also just what happened recently, we saw the 7 pre-democracy protesters have been convicted for organizing and participating in an unlawful assembly during the 2019 mass protest by Judge Woodcock. And reportedly said she had been receiving a few threatening phone calls. What is your reaction to that?
This is quite funny. I have not been threatened at all during this time, and it's of course a very sad thing and a sad commentary, in fact, on our society that people should actually do this when a judge who's obviously done her job, and I hope that whoever's done this will be brought to justice.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So far we have talked about the work of IPCC, the thematic study, what happened last year when there's a lot of outcry for commission of inquiry. Let's look at the future now. I mean, being a person of experience working in both the mainland and Hong Kong, with the national security law being enacted, I mean, how is it going to change the situation in Hong Kong in terms of the police and all these possible public order events? Will there be any more riots, do you think?
That, of course, I cannot tell. I don't have a crystal ball. But what I can be quite sure of is that our legal regime has been strengthened. The police powers have also been strengthened in this, and we can see definitely a return to law and order much easier than before.
Right.
I mean, you have to take into account the fact that Article 23 of the Basic Law has been there for over 20 years. It hasn't been used. And therefore, the central government does have to step in. So that we should have national security laws like other countries.
Do you think this national security legislation is going to make your successor, Priscilla Wong's job, easier or even more challenging?
It's very difficult to tell. I think challenges occur in times of peace as well as in times of unrest. And those would be different challenges. In times of peace, the challenge would be, in fact, the police, as well as us, assuring the public that if they do make a complaint against the police, it will be very, very thoroughly looked at. And that the police, in fact, does deserve the trust of the public. And I know the police are working very hard on this. And I think they may well succeed, but it will take time.
Right, Tony, thank you very much for your time. I mean, time runs very quickly. We wish you can talk more, but thank you very much for you to helping us to understand the very important role of IPCC, and I hope that all the audience will have trust in the processes. Hopefully we'll have a more stable and prosperous Hong Kong in years to come. And thank you for being with us, and have a good week, and see you next time. Good night.
Drink to that.
Yes.